Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your inside connection to outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into this feature edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome back Kaylee Leaguer, Assistant Manager in the Mid Atlantic State for CSF and Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Steve Smith. Steve, thanks so much for making the time and coming in. We are talking Sunday hunting, specifically Senate Bill 67 there in Pennsylvania, and really great opportunity that we have in front of us, picking up on the momentum from the last legislative session where we got oh so close to making Sunday hunting or repealing back Sunday hunting prohibitions in addition to which we already have a reality. So here we are. We're on April. We're in April, 2025, and looking at the same Senate bill. Welcome to the show. Bring us up to speed on from things from your side, where we're at on this, and talk about the excitement that a lot of the sportsmen and women of Pennsylvania are feeling about this.
Well, good afternoon, Fred and Kaylee, and it is great to be talking to you. That being said, I wish I wasn't talking to you about this issue. I wish it wasn't April of 25 having this conversation because, as you said, we were oh so close in the fall of 24 of getting this legislation across the finish line. So again, happy to be talking to you, but wish we weren't talking Sunday hunting. I'll put it that way because we thought we had it in place, and for a lot of us at the Game Commission, certainly me, personally and professionally, the Sunday hunting bill has been the holy grail of legislative priorities for decades now. I started working on this issue almost 20 years ago when I first joined the commission, and I'm so glad that we are continuing to get the momentum behind this bill, behind these efforts. I'm glad that we've changed the conversation from if Sunday hunting is going to happen to when Sunday hunting is going to happen and, again, as we both have pointed out, we were on the cusp of it last year. It kind of fell apart because of the politics at the last minute, heading right into an election. But that being said, here we are at the beginning of the session, starting fresh. Same general substance of the bill, which is to repeal that prohibition that's been in place for decades now, and to allow our board to manage wildlife 7 days a week, including Sunday. That's what we're going for.
And I want to acknowledge here first, because some of the audience may be a bit surprised, perhaps, that the executive director is on and able to speak as freely. And a couple of things for the audience in Pennsylvania, if you're not aware, Game Commission is a separate entity from the Boat and Fisheries Commission, two different sides of the house, and you're also independent enough that you are able to come on to a program like this and speak with relative ease about what the Game Commission sees as a positive step forward, one that is long overdue, and you're able to bring an opinion to the audience, which is great and not often the case. So we're glad that you do have that.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to point out, and appreciate you doing so. We are structured differently than a lot of our counterparts across the country in that we are not directly under the governor's office, as most state agencies would be. We are designed to be a separate entity, which means we don't receive a general fund appropriation. We are self-sufficient. We raise our funds mainly through sale of hunting and trapping licenses, as well as natural resource development on our game lands, and then, of course, the federal side of it. That's how we operate. What that gives us is a little bit more flexibility than potentially other state agencies or other counterparts across the country, and that we can comment specifically on legislation that would be to the betterment of our agency. And we absolutely see removing the prohibition on Sunday hunting as being one of those bills that would be for the benefit long term of what we were trying to do in Pennsylvania and Maine.
No doubt. Now, acknowledging, I know when we have testified in committee in Harrisburg, or we've submitted testimony, written testimony, part of that is the acknowledgement of these old blue laws that were in existence, and we're driving social standards that they're kind of they're outdated at this point. I mean, and if someone wanted to come at me with a faith-based philosophical argument, I'd have that argument because, if if it boiled down to the Lord's Day and a day of rest, well, if we got into the actual words, that doesn't prescribe for that. So that's kind of a debunked argument as well. But that's not what we're here. This is a faith-based argument. It is just bringing us current and recognizing that the limiting of the opportunity and the access during the week, acknowledging that mom and dads, whoever you are, whatever your family situation is, most people are busting their tails 40 plus hours a week, if not probably in the 60s, right? And then you add kids to that, and you're trying to get your kids outdoors and, you know, the community itself at large, and even just the general public is always bemoaning over the last at least decade, getting the kids away from the screens, get them away from the screens. Well, here's a great opportunity to get them away from the screens. And you've cut that time in half by not promoting or getting us over this hump, this barrier to entry in a Sunday hunting prohibition, right? So right away, um, just doing that alone helps at a familial level, right? And working to bring about some social um normative change, if you will, and getting folks back outside and promoting that lifestyle. Speak to that a little bit and kind of the contradictions that are set up with that.
Yeah, and I agree with all the points you brought up. And first I'll just touch on the faith base because we have heard that a lot. And my response back to that would be, this doesn't force anybody to hunt on something. This just creates the option. And for those who have other commitments, be it religious, be it family, be it school, be it work, whatever, we certainly understand that those are still going to be a real thing. What this is going to potentially do is allow our board, though, to have the option to look at seasons and make a decision about which seasons can include Sundays as well. And we just think that decision should be better left up to our board. Right now, the board doesn't have the ability to do so, and I can, certainly speak to it as a parent, and I've lived it. I've seen what it's like trying to get kids involved in hunting, and I've seen all the competition for their free time that exists. I've been on the side of a ball field on a Saturday when we're there watching them, go through a soccer tournament, playing softball, playing baseball, whatever it might be. And it never fails. Those tournaments seem to be scheduled on Saturdays, and Sunday is the next day, and it's the most beautiful day of the week too. But guess what? I can't take them out. We can't go squirrel hunting. We can't go turkey hunting. We can't go sit in the deer blind. We can't do all those things that are really important to us because of a prohibition that's just been in place, and because that's how it's always been. And what I think what this bill does is it really forces that conversation of, is that practical? Why have that in place? Given that we need that next generation of sportsmen to come behind, and we know it means getting youth involved at an early age. What better way to do that than on a day of the week when, again, recognizing not everybody's free on a Sunday, but when a good majority of our individuals potentially may be, we don't want them on a screen. We don't want them watching, something on TV. We want them out in the woods. We want them out and getting involved. We want them participating at a young age, and getting that ingrained into the fabric of who they are so that we can keep managing wildlife. And I see Sundays and what it could potentially open up, the possibilities of expanding for a lot of people, almost essentially doubling their hunting seasons.
Mhm.
I know so many people who are just limited to a Saturday. That's the reality that we deal with. And if we could give them Sundays across the fall, again, get them out for squirrels, get them out for small game, pheasants, all those things that really hook somebody and help them become a hunter for life. And I think this legislation will go a long way to helping us do that.
As we mentioned at the top and acknowledged the uniqueness of your department, the commission there being independent, it's weird to me that something like this has, has gotten to this point, right? And again, we'll address the political gamesmanship to an extent here later, but if we're gonna trust the PGC on a myriad of things and to go out there and have mission delivery on the ground for the people of Pennsylvania on everything except this. It's just it kinda seems like an affront to that vested authority in the commission and your agency professionals, right? Like, you're good to, adjudicate on everything else and prescribe for sound wildlife management based in science in the Keystone State, except for Sunday. What are we doing?
Yeah, no, the amount of responsibility that's entrusted to this agency is incredible. We have 480 wildlife species in the state that we manage, 1.53, million acres of game lanes that we own and actively manage. Our decisions that we make impact things like agriculture, impact things like energy policy. You run the full gauntlet of responsibilities that go through our board of commissioners. They can also handle potentially opening or closing seasons on Sundays. Like that is within their purview, within their ability to do. And I think that by and large, the hunters of Pennsylvania would like to see our board being the ones who make that decision as opposed to the way it is currently, which is within statute, just a prohibition. So, absolutely, if our board can handle all those other responsibilities that have been entrusted to them, they can handle when and when not to open hunting on Sundays as well.
Yeah, and that I mean, for our part as well, we agree that is the preferred method, and you have most of the states there's a handful of states where that's not the case, but most of the states in the country where they have a border commission that is part of that rulemaking and season setting. It's vitally important on a whole bunch of reasons we've covered on this show, um, but namely not legislating wildlife management is the key point, I think, and to drive home. Again, acknowledging that the professionals at the state agency are entrusted with all this other stuff, except we wanna just zero down on this one thing because it's become somewhat of a political football, and at the end of the last session, it most definitely did, unfortunately. Um, all that to say, you referenced that there is support for that, there in the state. I think Haley's with us, but I think she's having a little bit of Eastern Shore internet challenge, so I'm gonna ask this on her behalf. You know, of those hunters in the state, do we know what that support looks like? How many hunters, or is there a majority or some sort of percentage we can talk about there in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, the latest survey that I'm familiar with happened probably about 2 years ago,
Mhm.
and it showed for the first time that we crossed that 50% threshold, where we have a majority of hunters that were surveyed who indicated the support for Sunday hunting as well as indicated support for letting the board of commissioners make those decisions. And I really can't speak to how big of a change that is and the shift that I've seen going back 15, 20 years ago. And I can remember one of the first legislators who brought this issue up. I went with him. We traveled across the state, and I can remember speaking to a packed auditorium, and he asked how many people support Sunday hunting. And out of, I'll say 200 people, maybe 10 raised their hand.
Is that right?
That's how ingrained it was that no, we don't hunt on Sundays in Pennsylvania. And I can remember him looking at me and he said, well, we got our work cut out for us. And he wasn't kidding. And now here we are where we finally have crossed that 50 percentage point where if people are supportive of it, our hunters accept it, and they'd like to see again what it comes down to is, you know, it's more so just who makes the decision moving forward. And what people would like to see, what our hunters would like to see is that decision be made by our board of commissioners. So that every year, because our board adopts seasons and bag limits on an annual basis, so let our board come in every year, review the data, see where we're at with our harvest goals, see if we're below or above objectives with different species, and then make a decision after considering the scientific side as well as the stakeholder input on what species can allow for additional summer hunting opportunities. That's the way the regulatory process is set up. It's been that way in Pennsylvania for over 100 years. It works with every other species. It works with how we manage our game lands. It works with everything else that can work for some. Oh,
A couple of years ago, you guys did make a little headway, we can call it that, a certain chipping away. You guys were allowed to, have 2 Sundays at 3, thank you, at your discretion as to where those Sundays were put. Talk about how you guys got to that point. Was this more of a case study? "Okay, let's see if this works, if there's a response," or how did you guys arrive at 3 and how those Sundays were allotted?
yeah. And let me just clarify. So it's 3 Sundays now that we can have hunting in some on Sundays in Pennsylvania. So we get three a year. Two are set in statute. So one is during archery deer season, one is during firearms deer season, and then one is left to the discretion of our board of commissioners. Um, In all honesty, again, having been in the legislative process for a long time, that was a right approach because it seems like incrementally making changes is a good, path versus just ripping the Band-Aid off all at one time. So I like that strategy. I think it was smart to come in and ask for 3 to show that it can work, and we've demonstrated that over the past couple of years that that's been in place. In fact, one of the Sundays that is in our the law, it be this way and our board has implemented is one is required to be during the firearms deer season. So our board has taken that and set it during the first Sunday of the firearms deer season, which is the second day of firearms deer season, which means it's the second highest participation day that we'll have in hunting in Pennsylvania. And you know what? We haven't had the sky haven't fallen. There hasn't been increased complaints. There hasn't been all of the parade of horribles that people were concerned about happening. It hasn't taken place. In fact, last year was the lowest number of hunting related shooting incidents in Pennsylvania since 1915. So even with 3 Sunday hunting days taking place, even with one of those Sunday hunting days being on what essentially is the second highest day of participation that we'll have in Pennsylvania as far as hunting, with hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvania hunters out carrying high-powered rifles all across the state, we still hit a record for the lowest number of hunting-related shooting incidents in over 100 years. So that shows that Sunday hunting can work in Pennsylvania. We've demonstrated it for 6 years now on an incremental basis with those 3 days, and I think now the time is right, and I think, again, most people would agree with us. Even the legislature was so close, not to keep coming back to it, but they were so close to passing that bill last year. It fell apart, not because of the substance of the bill, just more so the timing, some of the other issues that were at play there. But we're excited to build on that momentum because I think we can make the case. We've demonstrated that it can work in Pennsylvania, and the support is there.
What do you think your safety, statistics are attributed to? Is this a matter of better hunter ed curriculum, more hands-on, more technology to share information? What has gotten that to increase opportunity and then see, safety, be better across the board?
There's no doubt our hunter trapper education program does a great job, and we are so fortunate to have thousands of dedicated instructors who deliver that curriculum all across the state, and most of them do it on a volunteer basis.
Mhm.
So we have a great program in place. We have the instructors who deliver it. And what we see time and time again when it relates to hunting related shooting incidents is that they are all of them, and I'll make that statement. They are all avoidable just by remembering the basic tenets of firearm safety of treating every firearm like it's loaded, keeping it pointed in a safe direction at all time, and only firing if you are 100% sure of your target and what's behind your target. Those 3 things, right? Like, they're not complicated. It's how we start our curriculum by hitting those things. We mentioned it multiple times. Just putting those in place in practice, um, would eliminate hunting related shooting incidents every now because when an incident takes place, it's almost always going to be because of one of those things. So we've made it a point of emphasis. It's a priority for us to make sure hunters keep those things in mind when going to the field. Again, just keep that firearm in safe direction, finger off the trigger until it's time to fire, and make sure you're safely identified your target and what's behind it. And that'll go a long way, a very long way to demonstrating how safe hunting is. We can just remember those things.
No doubt. So, out of 50 states, um, wanna say we're at 40 states where we have no issues with Sunday hunting, and then 8 of those states, to include Pennsylvania, like, to your point, have incrementally gotten to open access, whether it's on species specific or it's on private land access or it's during archery, but there's been some form of loosening of the belt to getting us to these points where Maine and Massachusetts are the only 2 states with a complete and outright prohibition, on Sunday hunting, right? So, everyone seems to be making everyone the of the remaining 10 states are making great headway in getting there. Certainly, Pennsylvania getting Senate Bill 67 over the finish line would be a huge leap into the 21st century, one that's needed to be done. I'm setting this up because what you said earlier and, you guys being, not funded by any general funds, your self-sufficient, self-feeding system. One, it's good to acknowledge the great hunting heritage that is part of the Keystone State and the sportsmen and women of Pennsylvania, right? Like, it is deep, it is rich, it is part of that DNA, part of that fabric in that state, and I mean, if not for Edgefield, South Carolina, I dare say the NWTF headquarters would probably be somewhere in Pennsylvania, right? I mean, it's incredible. I wanna say Pennsylvania probably has the most NWTF chapters in the entire country, right? Because of those license sales, because of that participation, I think it's important, and you said at your curriculum level, you guys are teaching those 10 commandments, the tenets, whatever you wanna call them, of safety. Of your firearm safe, there's also an important message and story to be telling, I think, and I wanna give you an opportunity to talk to this. And more reason to open up Sunday hunting is that funding mechanism, Wildlife Restoration Act. We go back to 1937, we're talking about the Pittman-Robinson Act. How the entire community and other stakeholders, you wanna call them consumptive, non-consumptive, whatever makes you feel good, but a whole lot of people got together nearly 90 years ago and said, "Hey, we gotta fix what's broken here, and we got a way to do that, and then we're gonna self-impose manufacturer level, excise tax on firearms, ammunition," and eventually this is, been added to archery accoutrement going on through the years. Talk about that story and why doubling that access on the weekend is so important, especially when funding and mission delivery for Pennsylvania, commission.
Yeah, you hit on a great point that I think gets to a deeper level than most people realize just how important this is. First of all, so two things I'll talk about. First of all, hunting by law in Pennsylvania, and you're absolutely right. It's such a huge part of our culture in this state. It blows people away when they see how important hunting is in Pennsylvania and how much it um, again, is just ingrained in who we are. So, first thing by law is as the game commission, we are to manage wildlife through hunting and traveling. That is the method that is how we keep populations in check. Is it the first primary methodology is hunting and traveling. So we start with that. That's how important it is. Second, though, is again we are essentially a self-funded agency. So not only do we need hunters and trappers to manage wildlife, but we need the revenue from hunters and trappers to fund our wildlife conservation efforts. So everything is connected. That we need to be able to manage species, and we need the funding that comes from hunters and trappers. So what Sunday would do potentially again is keep that younger hunter generation engaged. Keep those for whom a Sunday means additional days that otherwise they wouldn't be able to get out there. So it keeps us at a point where we have enough hunters to manage wildlife, but then also we have enough revenue coming in where we can do all the other things that we do as an agency, where we can fund wildlife management, be it on the research side, studying species, saving species, even the non-game species. That is some of the other 480 species that we manage. Say nothing about our wildlife protection efforts and how we fund our wardens, over 200 wardens out in the field, all of those things. And then we have the 1.53 million acres of game lands. All of that hinges on having a vibrant hunting and trapping base, which is, as anybody who's been in this space knows, is so connected to giving them the time to get out there in this day and age and do those things. So they're all connected. I appreciate you bringing that argument up. Like I said, it's something that when people kind of miss going over this issue, they just say, "Oh well, hunters want more time," but it's deeper than that. There's a reason why we want more time. There's a reason why it's so important for us to get that next generation out. It's because everything that we do is built upon it. So that's why, like I said, Sunday hunting is the holy grail in Pennsylvania. It has been for a long time. We can get this bill across the finish line if we I think the impact will be felt for generations.
And acknowledging, next generation when you're talking about and it's not necessarily just the kids either, right? Like, we can talk about kids and kids sports and what a lack of another day does, but even the emergent hunter, the adult onset hunter, whatever R3 buzzword we wanna put in here, but acknowledging that there's an adult hunter that never got to do it, and it piques their interest, whatever their motivations, right? We know that people are into, sourcing, uh, high protein, low hormone, low, contaminant, right? Mega farm raised, uh, protein. They're into being self-sufficient, it's empowering. There's all sorts of things that go with that. Some people just like going outdoors and just trying their hand and see if they have what it takes to do something like that. So again, when we talk about barriers to entry, it's enough to buy a hunting license. It's enough to get outfitted with the gear and just some of the basic stuff you need to be successful in the field. Again, that whole lacking of a complete day, where most people have time to go out, it's not only just cutting it off for the younger kids, but, like, there's a generation of adults, say, 32 to 18, that may not have had a mentor, but have the want and the motivation to do it now, and they're also being shortened by a shortened weekend.
Yeah, they absolutely are, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and I talk about how one of the days that we have Sunday hunting currently is the second day of firearms deer season on that Sunday. Well, the day before it is Saturday, and that's when over the past 6 years now, our board has set firearms deer season in Pennsylvania. So it starts on Saturday, and the second day is that Sunday. I can't tell you how many emails we have received, how much correspondence we have received from individuals who say, "Thank you for doing that." Because when the season structure was the traditional way, which is it started on a Monday, that was a barrier to entry for a lot of people. And I get emails, I get them constantly, and some of them I have them in my notebook, I carry them around with me when I go to downtown and talk to our legislators so I can show them. People who say, "I always kind of had an interest in hunting, but I never had the time." And now that your firearms deer season, which is the Super Bowl of hunting in Pennsylvania, by the way, firearms deer season is nothing comes close. Now that your firearms deer season starts on a Saturday, goes to a Sunday, I get to hunt for 2 days without having to take time off of work, without having to, pull my kids out of school. I get to participate in a way that I never could do previously, and it's meant the world to me, and it's kept me engaged in hunting because, like you said, it's that younger generation there that let's say 18 to 35, that those are the people we need to do the most to try to bring in because it's not just them, but they're bringing in their kids as well. And I talk about this a lot because people whenever you talk about hunter recruitment, everybody goes right to the kids, right? But as an agency, we have very little ability to impact and to reach kids to get that 9-year-old. How are they going to hear about the game commission? But if we can reach their parents and get their parents engaged and get their parents hunting more frequently, their parents will be the ones we direct them into hunting. So you can talk about return on investment. It's when we can get those individuals, that 18 to 35-year-old age group, get them interested in hunting for all the reasons that you talk about, right? Maybe they're not coming from a traditional hunting background, but they like everything about that connection with the lamb and conservation, and they want to be engaged in that. Let's make it easier for them. Let's remove barriers of entry because we're not only going to get those young adults, but then they're going to bring with them their children and get them engaged too and other family members. And now we're making the efforts that we need to keep this sport sustainable and keep it where we need it to be for all those reasons we talk about, managing wildlife and then the funding associated with it.
Yeah, another point to this too, Steve, that I wanted to bring up and is an acknowledgement of just how discriminatory the prohibition Sunday hunting is specifically to hunters. And we acknowledged, the ability that sportsmen and women through their license purchases bring and what that does at the federal match level, that 3 to 1, and what that does for a self-sustaining organization like PGC. It often hunters will ballyhoo and say, "Oh, it's all built on our back," which to an extent it is, and if we're being honest brokers, we have to acknowledge that the rec shooting, part of our community does float the bill most of it because of, their ammunition purchases and their firearm purchases. I bring this up and frame it this way, not frame it, but just it's fact. I can go out in Pennsylvania, private land, wherever I can shoot, go to a range, and I can shoot 10,000 rounds on a Sunday and not be bothered. No one's gonna have a problem with that. But if I was to dare sit in a tree stand with my archery equipment or maybe a muzzle loader, whatever, and maybe I shoot one shot, maybe 20% of people that go out on a daily basis during the hunting season are successful statistically, right? So out of 100 people, maybe 20 people get one shot off, maybe a second if they're lucky, and it dramatically decreases as you get that second round off. I'm saying this because I can go out and shoot all those 10,000 rounds, those hypothetical 10,000 rounds. The PGC has no shortage of fishing licenses. People can go fish on Sundays, no big deal. But it is discriminatory in practice to specifically target hunters and say, no, you cannot when I can go out and do anything else I want on a Sunday in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. Could you imagine the outcry if any other form of recreation was prohibited from engaging in it on a Sunday? Could you imagine if mountain bikers were only given 6 days a week. You name it right down the line. Youth sports. Imagine if you couldn't do youth sports 6 days or 1 day a week. There would be an outcry, and they would say, "How are we supposed to recruit and retain participants if you're limiting us on one of the days of the week that would be probably the number one, if not number two, as far as participation?" Nobody would accept that. Everybody would recognize that it would have a negative impact. Hunting's the same way. We need more time. We need the time to have individuals wherein, again, not everybody, but when a lot of them have that Sunday available, there is nothing worse than being at home on a Sunday when it's a beautiful day, and maybe it was rainy on Saturday, windy, snowy, or maybe again you're on the sidelines at a youth sports event, and then you wake up Sunday and it's just crisp, it's beautiful, the sun is shining, and you want to be out in the woods doing what you love to do, right? And yet, for some reason, because of the law that was passed decades ago, we don't have the ability to do so. It certainly in that movement feels pretty discriminatory.
And if Kaylee could get through, she would tell you that, in her experience, because as a Maryland resident, she's dealt with this too and trying to make headway in Maryland for their prohibitions, is that, yeah, on Saturday, the wind will blow and it'll be terrible conditions for duck hunting, but then Sunday, it's perfect and you can't do a thing about it, right? Another angle I wanted to take on this specifically in Pennsylvania, which I think is interesting and often definitely goes unnoticed, except if you're a resident motorist, is the amount of vehicle collisions you have specifically with white-tailed deer and what that has done to the insurance industry in Pennsylvania. I gotta believe that the insurance industry in Pennsylvania is a proponent and wants to see Sunday hunting passed. From a management standpoint, I mean, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, you guys are the professionals on the ground. You guys are the ones that are allowed to prescribe and make seasons. Giving the majority of people another day to hunt directly impacts those game management goals that you have set, that your game managers have set, that would help offset so many of these collisions and the insurance rates in your state. Can you speak to that?
I can, and I'll say that if the insurance companies are in favor of Sunday hunting, if they are, they have not, to my knowledge, expressed their support. I think that they are prepared to just adjust the rates accordingly.
Yeah.
But one other stakeholder, though, that has been front and center and made their support loud and clear, and it shocks people when I bring it up, is the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. And it's hard to say just how big of a change that is and put it in perspective because for years, the Farm Bureau was adamant that they did not want to see expanded Sunday hunting. Their concern was just their membership being bothered by hunters coming through their properties on Sunday. And a lot of times you've heard the expression that we all need a day of rest, right? We all need a break. So give wildlife a break, give farmers a break, landowners a break, give hunters a break. Let's just not have Sunday hunting. But the fact that the Farm Bureau has now come out in full support of Senate Bill 66, both this year and last year, the fact that I've had these meetings with them where we are side by side singing the exact same tunes, saying we need this because as we know, and as you articulated, deer impact a lot of different industries. They have the ability to impact agriculture, certainly the insurance industry, like and the list goes on and on and on. And those groups are coming to the table saying, "Hey, this isn't just about recreation anymore. This just isn't about adding another day for hunters to go out and enjoy themselves. We need hunters out there doing what hunters do, which is managing wildlife populations. We need to get them in check." The members of the agricultural community in Pennsylvania have made that message or sent that message loud and clear that they are willing to change their historic opposition on something as important as Sunday hunting. They're ready to do a 180 on it, and they have been because it's that important to them for all the reasons that we talked about. It's important to them to see hunters out there on those days taking care of wildlife populations, but they also realize it's just as important that we're training that next generation that's going to come behind in big. And if we can't get them engaged at an early age, if we can't get those young adults, if we can't get those young adults who then have children, if we can't do that, you know, we might look around in a few years and say, how are we going to manage wildlife? Who's going to do it? Because we all face the same challenge across the country, which is by and large, our hunting demographic is getting older, right? It's hunting in Pennsylvania. It was really The surplus of hunters that we have was really a product of that baby boomer generation and amount of hunters that they produce. Going back even beyond that, and you had those World War II vets that came back, had an interest in hunting, and the baby boomer generation followed, and we had an explosion of hunters in Pennsylvania. In the early 80s, we had 1.3 million hunters, but it's been on a downward trajectory ever since then.
Mhm.
That baby boomer generation is starting to age out of hunting. So we look at it from a wildlife management standpoint and become really concerned about what the future is going to be. And I think those stakeholders in private industry, be it agriculture, be it insurance, whatever, are looking at it and they're having the same concerns. And we've all reached the same conclusion, which is we need to expand some Sunday hunting opportunities.
So with that, and as we come to a close here, and again, thank you so much for your time. What can people in Pennsylvania specifically, and I know we'll get support from around the country, and because here in the last couple of years, our community, I think, has really done a good job of stepping up and supporting out of state, what they consider out of state efforts and the like. But specifically in Pennsylvania, what can we do to get this over the finish line? What can residents do to take action? I know for our part, last week, our action alert went out. CSF, along with probably a dozen and a half other in-state and national partners, put that grassroots effort out there. It's very specific to sign on. People can tailor their message, and it will go strictly to certain legislators, and we won't span the entire legislature, but folks on that committee specifically will get that. What else can people do, Steve, from your perspective, and get involved?
Yeah, it's that simple. It's engaging in the political process, right? So the bill was just introduced, and because of that, there's now several um, hoops essentially that we got to jump through to get it to the governor's desk, lean the last one. So the first is the Senate Game and Fisheries Committee is going to have to move the bill. Once that happens, it'll go for a vote in front of the full Senate, which will then potentially send the bill to the House Game and Fisheries Committee, which has to move the bill and then goes in front of the full House. So several, again, hoops that we got to jump through here. With each stage, what I would recommend is follow the game commission, follow our social media pages, be engaged with our stakeholders because we're going wherever we need support. We're not going to be shy in asking for it. We recognize that the window is open to get this bill across the finish line. So as we go through each of those stages, each of those committees, when we get to the full chamber, be it that Senate or the House, where we need support, we're going to make sure that we can send that call out to our partners to step up because as an agency, we can ask for it. We can make the case. We can say that we need it because of 20 years down the road. We can say all of that, but that pales in comparison to the impact that it has when members of the House or Senate hear directly from their constituents
Yeah,
who
exactly.
say, "We need this. I want this. Let's make this happen." That's what really moves the needle. And again, the agency can do so much, and we're trying. We're working with our partners. But man, when that elected official gets a call from their constituent, who lives down the road and is asking them to lend their support and make a vote in their favor, now we've really got their attention. So as we need that, we're gonna be reaching out and certainly appreciate so much the support that we've gotten along the way. But now it's time, let's get this built to the governor and let's get it signed into law.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could humbly take this one more step, and if you are engaging, as we often say on this program, it doesn't take much. Six or so well worded emails or uh very poignant conversations or voicemails typically gets a legislator at the state level as attention, right? They're not contacted.
Yeah, I think it would shock people how few emails it takes to get somebody's on their radar of like, hey, we need to take a look at this. I've seen bills become law on the back of a dozen emails or so,
Mhm.
and that is not an exaggeration. So it doesn't take much where you can get their attention and say, "Hey, this is something that my constituents are concerned about. I'm going to make it an issue, a priority issue for me too." So as this thing gets moving, as we get momentum behind it, as we start going through those, each rung on the ladder and start checking those boxes where we need to be, where we need support, we're going to be asking for it.
Yeah, no doubt. And what I was getting to in my final statement was, you may as a resident just tell your legislator, leave the bill alone. Or let it get through the legislative process. But enough with the amendment process. They played political gamesmanship with it last year, and that's just the truth of it. And that is unnecessary to kick it back and then watch the thing expire just because the clock runs out in the legislative session. We were like we said at the beginning, we got close. We're so very close. We're just picking the momentum right back up. I have considered, and Kaylee and I have talked about this. We're looking at more. This is more of a pause X. I know the legislative process technically starts over, but for this, and that I even had the same bill number is great. That continuity and almost branding of this Senate Bill 67. Folks, get involved, get excited, get motivated. Pennsylvania hunters, you guys want Sunday hunting. You need to show up where you're asked. And just as Executive Director Smith has just said, they're not going to be shy about asking for it. When that balloon goes up, you got to answer the call. Um, I'll give you a couple more minutes, sir, of your time if you'd like to take it to any further messaging, or otherwise we'll call it a show. And I'll thank you for your time. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, no, and likewise, I appreciate the discussion, and the support that we've had along the way, and it is almost difficult, I find, to get people re-engaged when you come so close, right? Like, there's that sense of defeatism that almost takes over, and, but I'm not seeing that with this. Instead, it's been, just renewed energy of like, "Okay, we came so close last time, we thought we were on the brink of a once in generational change. We're not gonna walk away from this fight. Like, the window's still open, we're gonna try to get it done," and it's easy to remember. I love what Senator Laughlin has done in branding this bill of Senate Bill 67, going from 6 days a week to 7 days a
Yeah,
week,
smart.
right? Like, and keep it, yeah, right there, and your last statement was spot on. Like, let's keep the bill clean. Um, to the extent that we can avoid any amendments on it, to the extent that we can even avoid any of that political quicksand that it got caught up in last time, it'd be incredibly beneficial. So let's keep it clean, keep it simple. Senate Bill 67, we're asking for support. Let's get this thing across the finish line, and it's going to be a great day in Pennsylvania when that happens.
No doubt. Director Smith, thank you, sir, so much for your time. Good luck to you. We're definitely behind you. We're on the ground with you there by Kaylee. Kaylee apologizes again that that Eastern Shore internet wasn't working out for her there in Maryland, so she had to bail. But no doubt, she's working alongside with you guys and in-state partners for seeing this through. So thank you, and
Thank you, Kaylee. Appreciate it.
we'll look forward to hopefully bringing some happier updates and news to this very program. Thank you, sir, for your time. All right, folks, it is my pleasure to once again welcome back our Vice President of Policy, Brent Miller. I had Brent come on the show today uh, for this topic. I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge on a whole lot of stuff, but Brent, early on in his career here at CSF, working in the Northeast, really dealt with this issue of Sunday hunting and institutionally probably has the most collective knowledge on this issue, the pros, the cons, and kind of all the arguments and specific legislative actions that have been taken over the years. So at this time, let's welcome in Brent. Brent, it's great to have you again.
Hey, Fred, great to be back. And fun to be talking about Sunday hunting today. It's a issue I kind of cut my teeth on in this community, as you hit on in your intro there. So,
Yeah, no doubt, and especially in my conversation with the director there in Pennsylvania, they're pretty close to being what Massachusetts and Maine look like. Um, So for you and your past work, really dealing with 2 states in the Northeast that just won't budge, are so dug in on this Sunday hunting deal, whereas come down the East Coast a little bit and some of the Midwestern states, you've seen an opportunity over the years to kinda chip away at Sunday hunting and kinda inching towards a complete rollback.
yeah, absolutely. There's been a lot of forward movement on it, just not so much in Massachusetts and Maine, so, in
That's right.
particular, to your point. But um, yeah, and it is predominantly, or at least it has been predominantly over the last couple of decades, really a Eastern Seaboard issue. But that wasn't always the case. There were a lot of other states, interior Midwest, as you said, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Alabama even had a restriction, Michigan, Ohio. So it was not unique to just the East Coast, but for in modern times, in the time that we've been working on the issue here with our National Assembly of Sportsmen's caucuses, it has been predominantly an Atlantic Seaboard issue.
And some of the I guess I call them rollbacks. Rolling back the prohibition incrementally so is we're looking at opportunities to allow Sunday hunting on private property, to allow Sunday hunting for species specific. I, reference Delaware just last year rolling back Sunday hunting prohibitions on uh, game fowl species, waterfowl, doves, turkey, upland species, right? So kind of one step every legislative session or every other, kind of getting there, being proactive on it, which is great. I'll tell you, the one that really kind of puts a burr under my saddle is the private land prohibition. As a property owner, and I think anyone else in the country, having a heavy-handed policy of not being able to do what I want on my own land is it's a hard pill to swallow, and people still have that problem. Um, Not so much in Maine, and we can touch on that because that tends to be a linchpin in that particular state. But can you speak to that part of it?
Yeah, so just first of all, obviously, we would love to have all of the restrictions repealed in one fell swoop and just level the playing field for everybody. Um, Unfortunately, to your point, that's not always the case, and so that incremental approach that you hit on at times can be really effective. And this is true in a lot of policy stuff, not just the Sunday hunting issue, but as it relates to Sunday hunting, sometimes you have to go in and just get a little bit prove to everybody that, hey, the sky's not going to fall, with this in place. People get comfortable with it. Then you can go back and get a little bit more and a little bit more. And yeah, that's what we had there in Delaware. And there's been a number of other states in Virginia and North Carolina, West Virginia that we've done the same thing, and Maryland as well. So incrementalism gets us to the finish line just a little bit slower. Yeah, so we'll still work in that direction if that's the way the political winds are blowing. But yeah, there's been a lot of different approaches for the states. Some have been very friendly on private lands and have only authorized private lands. Others have not, and it's been public lands only, or certain species, or in some cases even it hasn't been the full Sunday. There's been carve outs that have been put in place around the church hours. So you could go deer hunting for a couple hours in the morning, and then you had to be out of the woods while church was in session. And the church is over. Now you can get back in the woods for your evening hunt. So each of these has fit the particular state and the conditions on the ground and the will of the people as we've been working on these issues in terms of that incrementalism approach.
Opponents of this, and you hit on the church example, as to why there shouldn't be Sunday hunting, and some communities and some states still hold fast to that. In 2025, it almost seems like a grift at this point, and a useful talking point that outside of this is they're not serious. And I say that as somebody in my personal life, as a practicing man of faith, in my own study of specifically Catholicism, as a practicing Catholic, what the Sabbath is, and how the church recognizes that. And in fact, it's not said that, you're supposed to just sit around and do nothing for the day. In fact, if you're a practicing person of faith, God, says and created man and woman to work and work happily and to love their labor, right? And that, tending your garden, hunting, gathering, these are fruitful endeavors that man was built for. Again, if you're practicing and you believe in that, and that's your higher power, right? So I have a problem with the grift of grabbing onto that and saying, "Well, this is why, and this is where you should be," because in fact, it's just not true.
Yeah, and in fact, there are some in our community, and including people whom I hold in incredibly high regard, that theorize that actually the underpinnings of all of this is, to your point, a grift. It was a convenient excuse in terms of relying on the church and the Sabbath to put these bans in place. But there are theories that these are really rooted in at least classist and quite possibly racist underpinnings. Yeah, and then again, that justification for increasing church attendance was really just more the palatable rationale that they were using publicly for these. And so, just to unpack that theory a little bit more, when we think about the history of modern sport hunting in America, we have to go back to the mid to late 1800s. And so At that time, the people who were primarily engaged in the practice of sport hunting were, by and large, your wealthy and elite professionals and businessmen. And so, these are the people that owned the industry, they controlled commerce in this country, and also they wielded really significant political influence in a lot of circles. And these same individuals, they successfully passed a variety of new laws that protected game, established methods of hunting, and many of these were actually extremely positive and began forming some of the underpinnings of what was later, a century later, in fact, codified as our North American model of wildlife conservation as we know it today. But the same time period is also when many of the Sunday hunting laws took effect. And so to fully understand this theory, we also need to consider, kind of what else was happening in American society at that time. And most importantly for this discussion is that the Industrial Revolution was really beginning to accelerate after the Civil War. And so industry at that time was largely powered by cheap labor, often associated with immigrants, primarily from Eastern and Western Europe. And just for context, from the mid 1800s to early 1900s, America experienced that mass immigration of
Mhm.
people coming over during that time period. I think in 1790 we were roughly 4 million Americans on the census, 3.9, 4 million,
Wow.
somewhere in there. But by 1850, that population had risen to over 23 million, and then from 1850 to 1930, that population again more than doubled as America welcomed in an additional wave of immigrants coming in primarily from Europe, and including that there were, I think, 5.5 million Germans, 5.25 million Irish. And then there were about 25 million other people from further east in Europe. There were the Italians, the Greeks, the Hungarians, the Poles, the Slavs, and more. And so those immigrants, as they were coming over, they had a really strong tradition back home of killing wildlife for largely subsistence and putting food on the table. And in some cases, maybe also some sporting purposes. But in America, those same immigrants who were used to doing that back home were working 6 days a week at the height of the Industrial Revolution. And so they only had Sundays off where they could even potentially hunt. And then the theory then becomes that this elite ruling class really did not want those immigrants to be shooting, quote unquote, their game on the only day off where they could do so. So essentially, it's we hadn't really shaken off that king's deer mentality that was present in our nation's British roots. And so if all of this is true, and again, it is just a theory, but if it is true, then the so called blue laws really became policy with the stated rationale of encouraging church attendance, but
Mhm.
ultimately with this hidden motivation of keeping the working class and keeping the immigrants out of the American elite's game fields. You know, so again, redundantly spoken, just a theory, but when you really start dissecting it and you compare it against kind of the annals of American history, um, there's potentially some validity there, and it kind of starts to make sense. So again, I wish I could claim credit for coming up with all of that, but the gentleman that I've spoken to the most about this is without question one of the sharpest minds, for these things that we have in our community today. So kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, the brief history lesson there, just it just makes sense and it lines up. And again, if you do any sort of self-study on this stuff, you don't have to dig deep. I think you start coming to some of the same conclusions, and you realize truths. I'm doing the air finger quotes for the audience
Mhm.
again. Truths you thought were truths quickly unravel, and you realize not so much. And so let's go down this line again. Another concern is a safety concern, and often you hear we have to give we have to give the regular population a break on Sundays from all the hunters in the woods. We have to give the animals and the game species a break. And then, there's a safety issue 7 days a week. Well, our conversation that we had just before this one, Pennsylvania statistically proved that's false.
Um,
They brought their Sunday hunting back in the limited fashion that they've had, and their numbers went down. Their safety got better, right? So they've got a handful of years where that's false. As far as giving the animals a break, I come close to the speaker here, folks. Nature's not giving nature a break just because a handful of hunters in your neighborhood are not out in their tree stand or on in a wetland marsh hunting ducks. Does not mean any of these critters are getting a break from the treacherous thing that is existence in nature. So again, a lot of these arguments just tend to be so incredibly shallow. Yet people just latch on to them and say, "Well, it's got to be true."
Yes, yes, indeed. And that's great that you have that data coming out of Pennsylvania now. Yeah, Pennsylvania is not alone in that. As we've worked on these bans over the years, we've actually worked with the state agencies in follow-up years, 1 and 2 years after implementation, and checked in with the agencies and just, said, got that data in terms of what the truth is. Are wildlife populations suffering because there's another day of hunting out there? Across the board, no. Um, are there increased enforcement concerns, which is one of the other big arguments that we
Mhm.
hear that, that state game wardens are now going to have to be working 7 days a week. And there's going to be an increase in all of these violations that they now have to tend to because it'll be a free for all on Sundays. Again, patently unfalse and proven to be so through data from these state fish and wildlife agencies that have implemented the ban. And then, yeah, to your point, is these unfounded safety concerns. This argument that, well, this is my one day where I can be outside where I don't have to worry about being shot. Again, just patently untrue and proven to be so.
I have nothing to base this on other than just a general wondering, but you almost wonder because of the prohibition and because of the reduced access, and in most cases, we're literally cutting working men and women's time in half because of these prohibitions. As if some of the safety incidences they may have had were because of that this pressure in the background of I only got 1 day to get this done, and maybe there was a lack of attention to detail. Maybe there was a rush shot. Again, I got nothing to base this on, just thinking in real time. But reducing that pressure, literally doubling the opportunity on a weekend, maybe that eases some of that pressure and people are more um uh, attention to detail, I guess. I don't want to. Again, this is all real time thinking for me. I don't like that line of thought because I think the majority of our community is better than that. There may be, a very small few number of peoples, but again, the incidences are small in number too. So is there a correlation? I don't know, but it's worth exploring.
Yeah, and I think just to underscore again that regardless of what day a week it is, hunting is a safe
That's
activity,
exactly right.
period, full stop. Yeah, there's some really cool data that came out. I think NSSF put it out a number of years ago, maybe even a decade plus ago at this point. But it compared the safety rates of hunting to other common activities like billiards and throwing darts and playing soccer and all these other things that are more common in our society. And across the board, hunting was the safest activity, no matter how you dissected the data, no matter how you looked at it. So yes, inevitably there is, there can be some unsafe practices afield. There can be some incidents that pop up, but when you look at it in a holistic manner and look at the data, it's one of the safest activities that we could be doing.
Yeah, no doubt. And I remember hearing, and I wish I had it pulled up right away, but I remember hearing cheerleading was
Uh-huh.
statistically far and away more deadly and more dangerous than any hunting. And you think about all the kids out there just tossing each other in the air. Like, and it's okay.
Yeah,
No
I
one
mean,
no one has a problem.
there's that data showed there's a higher injury incident rate for shooting billiards or playing pool than there is for hunting with a firearm.
That's that's amazing.
So
Um,
again, and not, I understand people come to this with varying levels of comfort, and that's why I qualified, the safety concerns as unfounded safety concerns. Not to say that it's not valid that people are concerned for their safety; they should be. But when you really look at the data, those concerns are unfounded.
I'm just pulling up some data here, and I was trying to. There's an NRA study a handful of years ago. This one's interesting. You're 43 times more likely to be injured riding a bicycle than you are hunting with a firearm. It's cheerleading. They got the cheerleading in here. The
Um,
results are 30 times uh, as many injuries as hunting. Your odds of being injured while hunting deer are substantially lower than being injured by deer while driving. Last year, this is a 2017 study. Last year, there were an estimated 1.2 million auto deer collisions, resulting in almost 20,000 human injuries and roughly $4 billion in auto repairs, right?
Yeah,
So,
those numbers have just been going up each
yeah,
year. Yep.
yeah. And again, the preceding conversation, we brought that up too about the, game management and the ability giving Sunday opportunities in these states where we don't have them. It often goes unthought of, especially in these high, deer-specific population states like Pennsylvania. The insurance industry would love nothing more, and it's interesting that they don't come out and help support these efforts and get these pieces of legislation over the line from their perspective. I mean, you look at the insurance industry in California right now, and people can't buy insurance for their homes because of the propensity for wildfire and the poor forest management out there, right? So they just raise their rates to the point where no one can afford their insurance, so this no insurance is available. Well, take that model and then look at, these deer collisions in states like Ohio and Pennsylvania, other places in the Northeast where these populations are so kinda out of control and they're doing the best they can to manage that. Y Imagine what you could do. I mean, our own study showed, I think it was 117,000 more hunters would come, uh to the woods to hunt if they had that access to Sunday hunting, and I guess my point is, game managers and the professionals will be able to get those populations more in line by increasing that access, by having more people on the landscape, being part of that preferred, management tool as outlined in American System of Conservation, North American Model of Conservation. So, all these examples, all these things you and I are unpacking here in this conversation points to one thing, and that these laws are extremely discriminatory against one group and one group only, and that is hunters in these states where they exist. No other outdoor recreation, pursuit has these limitations put on them. Anything you wanna do on a Sunday, you can go do except hunting.
Yep, absolutely. And most of the other restrictions that were in place have now been repealed. And there used to be things like prohibitions against drinking alcohol on Sundays. There goes your NFL Sunday night, right?
Yeah.
Things like selling a car, or even at one time plowing your fields and tilling your fields was a prohibited activity on Sunday. And through time, all of those restrictions have by and large been repealed, and they are a thing of the past. And then we have this one little hanger on that's still on the books, again for hunting for Sundays.
And I often will use this point of emphasis, not saying that it's happening, but, it's just one of these things that you could. That I could on my own if I had a private property and I had a nice safe backdrop and I had my own shooting range, if I had property over the border in Maine, if I wanted to go shoot a pallet of ammo in Maine on a Sunday, I could do that. And that is by and large more fire trigger time than I would ever get at any duck pursuit or any whitetail pursuit on a Sunday, if I'm even pulling the trigger at all. As we know, I think the statistic is 20% of us that go out on a given day are successful.
Mhm.
That's not a lot of people pulling the triggers.
No, it's not. And think about your average whitetail hunter; they're lucky if they get one or two trigger pulls a season. And unless they're just wildly inaccurate and they have to mag dump on them. That's not happening. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense. To your point, there's a lot more lead flying through the air from target shooting, than there ever will be from hunting. Yet target shooting's allowed,
Yeah, exactly right.
and it should be allowed. And we're not saying that you should
That's
go the other
exactly right.
direction and try to ban that.
Right. Right, and that's I don't wanna be dishonest broker here, not acknowledge it, but I mean, this is a fact, this is a truth. I'm not trying to put a unnecessary light and, "Well, let's reconsider this." No, this all of it should be allowed and enjoyed should you want to. I wanna go to Maine, Brent, because Maine, it has an interesting, wrinkle in it where a lot of the opponents of Sunday hunting rest in a weird population. I still can't get a reasonable explanation on this. In the professional guide service, the people that are certified guides that make their living do not want Sunday hunting, and then have gotten together with some of the large tracts of private landowners by way of logging and paper industry, and using that as almost a hostage negotiation piece of, if you bring Sunday hunting to Maine, we will shut down all the North Maine woods. It's disturbing, and I again, I your experience, I'm curious, what has been the hang up there with that part of our community?
Yeah, that's been the same hang up and the same argument that I've been hearing since 2010, working on the issue up there. And the best that I've been able to figure out is it has a lot to do with the way that they operate their businesses. And so they use Sunday as the transition day between groups of hunters. So yeah, a new group will come in on Sunday. They'll hunt Monday through Saturday, pack up and head out Sunday morning. New group comes in Sunday night. So that's their day where they're flipping camp and taking care of business, or heading out of the woods and going back home and catching up with the wife or husband or what have you. So they really hold that day kind of sacred for
Mm.
that reason. And the concern that I've heard is that if Sunday hunting were to be authorized, they would feel pressure to utilize that day for hunting with clients, because inevitably there would be some guides that choose to do that so they can be the ones hunting on Sundays. Once one person does it, then it puts pressure on the rest because their hunts become more attractive if they're offering a 7-day hunt instead of a 6-day hunt. So again, that's the rationale that I've heard.
And I asked this knowing that was the answer to make this point. Just because we roll these prohibitions back and make Sunday hunting available doesn't mean you have to participate. The law isn't you shall go hunt. It's
Uh,
go if you want. And in that vein with the professional guides there in Maine, and we heard the same argument in Maryland too. I that's a you problem, not a me problem, and your personal business should not dictate to the general population of sportsmen and women. And I think it's such a selfish argument, and, I don't know, be better. I don't know, offer a good product. Maine has great guides. They do have a good product. Maine is a destination state, for sporting, with between black bear and the best odds for moose hunting in the lower 48 and fantastic waterfowling on the Rocky Coast. There's a lot to do in Maine. People are gonna come, and you're not gonna lose out on that. So again, it's another shallow argument that I don't put a lot of stock in, and I'm very surprised of how this is just been an obstacle, especially in that state.
yeah, and this may be a situation just to come full circle back to the beginning of our conversation around this concept of incrementalism. And there could be a path forward, perhaps, where we look at, okay, Sunday hunting is allowed on property that you hold title to, if you're a private landowner or if you have written permission from the landowner. It's just a step forward to give the common people who own land, to your point again at the beginning about private property rights and individual liberties on that property that you hold title to. Maybe that's a good starting point.
And we see these, annually come up, these opportunities that we try to do that. Massachusetts, for as long as I've been here and before, there's been some support and there's been a whole slew of different pieces of either trying to get archery or private property. Coming back to Maine right now, we have, a bill going through in House Bill 239, Sunday hunting for youth. All right, let's give our most challenged group of people, kids, people that just can't go out and afford it or do it on their own, and at least let them, in an effort to maintain a population as sportsmen and women age out and biology catches up with the boomers, and you and I aren't getting any younger, right? Who are we replacing them with? And if these kids in these states aren't having the opportunity, a bill like that I just talked about in Maine would be a fine start.
Yeah, agree entirely. It is interesting that you still face opposition even on concepts like that because, to your point, people are just so dug in and entrenched in their beliefs, and I think there's a real fear of the slippery slope argument coming true that, if you give an inch, you're gonna get run over by a mile. Yeah, but yeah, it doesn't have to be that way.
And not that
And
I'm a proponent of this, but I mean, you look back at I think it was New York, um, did a trial of this. I think it was a multi-year deal that had a sunset, and then everything worked out, and everybody was fine, and nothing happened, and they removed that sunset. And you can hunt Sundays in New York.
yep, they did a gradual approach over a course of about a decade where they opened up about a third of the state, I think back in 1993, and then 96 they opened up some more of it, and then finally in 2000 they made it permanent and removed all the restrictions again because it gave people a chance to live with it and understand for themselves like, okay, maybe I was wrong on this, and some of my fears just haven't come true.
Maine, I keep coming back to Maine because there's another interesting level of this fear of change. When we're talking about right now, we're working on right to hunt and fish in Maine, and we've talked about that on the program. Part of the opposition that was coming from some pretty heavy hitters in the state was Sunday hunting. The right to hunt and fish brings up this emotional argument about Sunday hunting, the authority of the state agency, Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, to still maintain that prohibition, and folks just get all sorts of twisting on it. And if we have this right to hunt and fish that protects all of us, well, there could be Sunday hunting. And it just, for me, it's just so wild to sit back and watch this and just how culturally in that state over a few generations, even your ardent sportsmen and women are they're signed on to it. And it's, man, how do we unprogram this?
Yeah, and there's some work ahead for sure.
No,
Yeah.
no doubt.
I remain optimistic. I mean, we have there's such a strong track record, particularly over the last 15 years. I mean, there's been close to 15 bills passed in 15 years that have added additional opportunities for Sunday hunting up and down the East Coast. And the map for Sunday hunting prohibitions looked incredibly different in 2010 than it does today. So we are making progress. There are a few hang-ons that we need to figure out still, but by and large, most states have some Sunday hunting opportunity today that just didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago.
And it's worth noting too, Brent, and again, you being the one person that had your hand in so much of this, like all of our work here at CSF being bipartisan, a lot of these rollbacks have been bipartisan as well. It's not one side saying yes, people are going to go hunt on Sundays. This has been a bipartisan effort, and you've had Democratic governors and Republican governors all put their signatures on these piece of legislation and creating more access.
That's right. Yeah, just underscores again, these are not partisan issues. People try to make them that way, but they don't. They are not at their core. Doesn't
So
matter.
currently, right now, as I said, we got opportunities in Maine, Mass, Connecticut, to roll back some of the more egregious ones, and then obviously, SB 67 in Pennsylvania. I'm not gonna ask you to look in the crystal ball. We know the political gamesmanship that was played at the end of the last session in Pennsylvania, Brent, and we talked about that with the director. And again, I wanna acknowledge how unique and how cool it was to have PGC director be able to speak so freely, and it's refreshing, and I understand the challenges at the executive level, having to answer to the executive part of the government in your states, but what it's nice to be able to have that conversation. Um, what would it mean? And I mean, again, your body of work, your professional work, and then just what tone do you think it sets if SB 67 can get over the finish line and onto the governor's desk?
Well, I think it would be huge. As you hit on, Pennsylvania is not one of the worst offenders, but it's right up there with them in terms of the prohibitions that are currently in place. Obviously, Maine and Massachusetts are the worst, and Pennsylvania, arguably, although it's somewhat of a subjective ranking, arguably, I would argue Pennsylvania is right behind them. So um, to fully leave that in the past, grant the rulemaking authority to the appropriate entity in the Pennsylvania Game Commission, who's supposed to be managing our resources, managing opportunity, managing sportsmen's impact on the landscape. That would be a phenomenal win.
Yeah, no doubt. It's I I like talking about this. It's fun to talk about and just look at the history. Not again, we acknowledge at the top 40 states are not dealing with this, and the whole and 8 more states are, or 7 really are not really hardened into this anymore. But this matters for all sportsmen and women. You're traveling, if you're taking your dollars out of your home state and going to someone else's state, buying those out of state tags, contributing to that local economy. Can you imagine what doubling that weekend opportunity looks like? It's it's a big deal for everybody.
No, it absolutely is, particularly for those rural economies that are reliant on this hunting and fishing related tourism that are keeping a lot of these communities afloat. It's a big deal when people aren't coming because they can't hunt the full weekend.
In the remaining moments here, Brent, I'll leave it to you for any parting thoughts or any additional context you want to add to this. But thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. 30 some odd minutes has flown by, and it's a passionate conversation and topic, and it's easy to fill some clock time, no doubt.
No, it absolutely is, and yeah, it's been fun, Fred. Don't know that I have anything wise to say at the end, but it's really fun being able to talk about this stuff again. Yeah, and then we didn't cover it in the program, but that study that you referenced at CSF, that was actually my master's thesis. So this is like the issue that brought me into the sportsman's community that got me started at CSF. Yeah, so to continue to be able to work on it and make the progress that we have as an organization over my 15 years with CSF has been nothing short of an honor.
I don't wanna let you go. I mean, we got nothing but time. Do you wanna go into that a little bit? I didn't even know that. I just learned something in real time.
I think we already covered it. Yeah, really what the thesis was about was it was examining the states that have taken action to change Sunday hunting to that time, which the thesis was written in 2010. And it looked at license sales statistics before and after the change in Sunday hunting policy occurred to try to predict what an increase may look like for various states across the country. And ultimately, it did show that there was a very likely impact of Sunday hunting, to your point, of potentially 117,000 new hunters added to the 6 states that at the time, including Pennsylvania, that did have a complete ban. Um, yeah, and there were a number of states that are not on that list anymore because we've been successful in working to get them off, including West Virginia and Virginia, are kind of top of mind for me, Pennsylvania being right there with them.
Awesome stuff. Well, thanks for taking that trip down memory lane a little bit. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.
Right now, Senate Bill 67, Pennsylvania, still in play. The action alert that we've put out is still available. So if you're a resident in Pennsylvania, if you see that from any of our partners or us directly, please do take the couple minutes to participate. You can go into the field and edit that message to your liking, to your points, and it will go directly to the committee, the specific legislators. We don't spam the entire body. That's how we're able to really drive some of this change. It's really awesome the way we're able to deliver that. So take action, answer this call. Let's get this over the finish line. We were so close last year, and I believe we can get there again. Um, and then if you're a legislator listening in any of the other states we talked about, Connecticut, Massachusetts, you guys have an opportunity to make some incremental change, and I'd recommend that you do that. Let's get the ball rolling in those states. Brent, it's always great catching up with you. I appreciate your time, and thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Fred.
All right, my thanks to Brent once more for his time. Director Smith in Pennsylvania for the conversation. I'm sorry we couldn't get Kaylee to get on the line there with the internet troubles there, but I think we got it all and covered it all the good work that is being done uh, in these states that we've talked about today, and where we have challenges. So you guys in these states have the opportunity to make changes for yourself. Certainly by way of the action alert we've talked about, but also making contact with your state legislators in those states, Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, balls in your court. You guys can make it happen. And truly, Pennsylvania, there is no reason why it's a clean bill. As we said earlier in the program, as a director also said, let's leave it where it is. Let's not make any add-ons to it. Let's not go through a crazy amendment process and then let this thing die on the vine because of political gamesmanship. You have a real opportunity to make some real change and do some real good here in Pennsylvania. So it is high time and past for getting it done. There's no reason to muck this up. So let's go, Pennsylvania. Let's get Sunday hunting on the books. Leave it to the good people at PGC to determine how they're going to facilitate that and give them the opportunity to prove, like all these other states have that have rolled this back, that this isn't the big deal. Opponents say it is, and continue to add to the success story, and just really doing some good in those states. Not a lot of housekeeping this week, guys. It's a really enjoyed the conversations. Great show. Obviously, passionate about it and creating that access. So it's easy to talk about and engage, and I hope you found it to be the same. As always, we ask that you get involved here by the subscriptions, the follows, the star fill-ins, whatever the platform you're listening to us on for your podcasts. Get engaged. It takes seconds, and we appreciate it. It helps tremendous growth here over quarter one in 2025 for this program. Your continued involvement and participation helps that growth and helps these stories, these important issues get pushed out to new audiences, to new audience and audience members rather, to find us, to discover us, and find the resource that this is that you all have found to be of value to you because you're listening. We want other people to do that, especially our legislators, those people that are making the votes, that are making the policy, that are moving that stuff forward. I hope you folks that are part of that are finding this to be helpful, clearing up some things, and helping to make better informed decisions in your state houses, and also when we have our federal policy team on at the federal level as well. Even though I know our federal policy team does a great job of having those conversations daily. All right, that's it. Let's put a button on it, a bow on it rather. We'll button her up. That's where I was going with it. Do tune in every Wednesday, as always, guys, for the weekly roundup. We will do this again in a couple weeks. If you do listen to this one quick, plenty of good stuff to go back and listen to. That Q1 update from that aforementioned federal policy team and Taylor Schmitz, Chris Horton, and John Colclasure. Lots of good stuff since the beginning of the year. Do go back and check it out. Hard to believe that we're well into April here. Spring turkey season is kicking off. And hope you're able to get out if that's what you're doing. Striper migration on the East Coast is kicking off as well. So hopefully you're able to go out there and get some fishing done, or doesn't have to be the East Coast, wherever you're at. We got Chris Horton coming up on the next show. We're going to talk about some state rec fishing catch data, even more to the migrations and opportunities along the southern Atlantic coast, the Gulf states, what they did right, what others are not doing right, how we can help that. So always great to catch up with Chris. And then stories from turkey camps coming up. We got events coming up and congressional clays down the line here. So a whole lot of good shows to come. Continue to tune in, like, subscribe, rate, like I said, and never miss a beat. If you're doing iHeart, guys, you can do the presets. So you just open up iHeart, boom, there we are, Sportsman's Voice. You can go in there and pre-program that preset, and again, you'll get those notifications every time we get a new show. Thanks for bringing us along for your day, wherever you're at. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. Be safe out there. We'll see you next time. So long. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.